Alfred the Great unites the Saxon kingdoms. England wasn't always one country. In the 800s it was split into several smaller kingdoms that often fought each other. The biggest threat wasn't other Saxons though, it was the Vikings. These raiders from Scandinavia had been attacking England for decades. They wanted land, treasure and power. By 871 the Vikings had conquered most of England. They controlled kingdoms like Northumbria, East Anglia and parts of Mercia. Only one Saxon kingdom remained independent: Wessex. Alfred became King of Wessex that same year. He was only 22 years old. The situation looked hopeless from the start. The Vikings launched a massive invasion of Wessex in 878. Alfred's army was crushed. He had to flee and hide in the marshes of Somerset with just a handful of followers. Most people thought it was over. The Vikings seemed unstoppable. But Alfred didn't give up. He spent months hiding and planning. He secretly gathered support from the people of Wessex. He built a network of loyal followers who were ready to fight back. In May 878, Alfred emerged from hiding. He rallied his forces and confronted the Viking army at the Battle of Edington. This time, Alfred won decisively. The Viking leader, Guthrum, was forced to surrender. Alfred made him sign a peace treaty. Part of the deal required Guthrum to convert to Christianity and leave Wessex alone. But Alfred knew peace wouldn't last forever. He spent the next several years preparing for future attacks. He built a network of fortified towns called burhs across Wessex. These fortified towns served as military bases and safe havens for local people. No one in Wessex lived more than 20 miles from a burh. If Vikings attacked, people could reach safety quickly. Alfred also reorganised his army. He created a rotation system so half his forces were always ready to fight, while the other half worked their farms. This meant Wessex always had defenders available. He built a navy too. Alfred understood that to fight Vikings, you needed ships. His fleet intercepted Viking raiders before they could reach the coast. The fortifications worked. When Vikings attacked again in the 890s, they couldn't break through Alfred's defences. They eventually gave up and left England entirely. Alfred didn't just focus on military matters. He promoted education and learning throughout Wessex. He believed a strong kingdom needed educated leaders and laws that people understood. He translated important Latin texts into English so more people could read them. He established schools and brought in scholars from other countries. Alfred also created a unified law code for Wessex. He combined old Saxon traditions with Christian principles to create laws that applied to everyone equally. By the time Alfred died in 819, Wessex was the strongest kingdom in England. He had saved his people from Viking conquest and built the foundation for something bigger. His children would build on what he started. Edward the Elder expands his father's realm. When Alfred died in 899, his son Edward inherited a secure kingdom. But inheriting Wessex wasn't enough for Edward. He had bigger plans. Edward faced an immediate challenge to his rule. His cousin Ethelwald believed he had a better claim to the throne. Ethelwald fled to the Vikings and convinced them to support his rebellion. The rebellion failed quickly. Ethelwald died in battle in 902. Edward had proven he could defend his crown just like his father. Now Edward turned his attention to the Viking-controlled territories in England. These areas were known as the Danelaw. The Vikings had ruled there for decades. Edward didn't rush into war. He spent years strengthening his position first. He maintained his father's system of burhs and kept the army ready. He also formed an important alliance. His sister Ethelflaed ruled Mercia alongside her husband. When her husband died, she became the sole ruler. Brother and sister worked together to push back the Vikings. In 910, Edward won a major victory at the Battle of Tettenhall. This battle broke Viking power in the North Midlands. It opened the door for Edward to expand. Edward and Ethelflaed launched a coordinated campaign. They built new fortified towns deep into Viking territory. Each burh gave them a permanent foothold in conquered areas. The strategy was methodical and effective. Edward would capture an area, build a burh, garrison it with troops, then move forward. The Vikings couldn't recapture lost ground. By 918, Edward controlled most of the Danelaw south of the Humber River. The remaining Vikings recognised his authority and submitted to his rule. That same year, Ethelred died. Edward immediately took control of Mercia. The nobles there accepted him without resistance. Edward now ruled both Wessex and Mercia as one kingdom. The Welsh kings also submitted to Edward's authority. They recognised he was now the most powerful ruler in Britain. Even the King of Scotland acknowledged Edward's dominance. Edward continued building burhs throughout his enlarged kingdom. He established administrative centres that could collect taxes and enforce laws. He was creating a real government structure. Unlike the Vikings, who simply raided and conquered, Edward built institutions that would last. He appointed loyal officials to govern newly acquired territories. He ensured his laws applied everywhere. Edward also maintained his father's emphasis on learning and culture. He supported the church and encouraged the spread of education throughout his realm. When Edward died in 924, he controlled more of England than any king before him. He had transformed his father's survival strategy into a campaign of conquest. The separate Saxon kingdoms were becoming one unified state. His son would finish what 2 generations had started. Athelstan becomes the first king of all England. Athelstan took the throne in 924 after his father Edward died. He was about 30 years old and had been training for kingship his entire life. His grandfather Alfred had saved Wessex. His father Edward had conquered the Danelaw. Athelstan would complete their work and unite all of England under one crown. But first he had to secure his position. Not everyone accepted him as king immediately. His half-brother Edwin challenged his claim briefly, but the opposition faded quickly. Athelstan focused on the northern regions his father hadn't fully controlled. Northumbria was still largely independent with Viking rulers in York. This had to change. In 927, Athelstan marched north with his army. The Viking king of York, Guthfrith, had just died. Athelstan seized the opportunity and captured York without much resistance. For the first time, one king ruled all of England from the English Channel to the Scottish border. Athelstan took a new title to reflect this achievement: King of the English. The other rulers in Britain weren't happy about Athelstan's growing power. The King of Scotland, Constantine, saw Athelstan as a threat. So did the Viking rulers in Ireland and the Welsh princes. They formed an alliance against Athelstan in 937. Constantine of Scotland, Owen of Strathclyde, and Viking forces from Dublin joined together. Their combined army invaded northern England. Athelstan gathered his forces and met them at Brunanburh. The location of this battle is still debated by historians, but its importance is clear. It was one of the largest battles ever fought in medieval Britain. The fighting was brutal and lasted all day. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, but Athelstan's army held firm and eventually broke the enemy forces. The victory was complete. Constantine fled back to Scotland. The Viking leaders were killed. Owen barely escaped with his life. After Brunanburh, no one challenged Athelstan's authority again. He was the undisputed king of all England. The other rulers in Britain accepted his supremacy. Athelstan spent his remaining years strengthening the kingdom. He created a uniform system of laws that applied throughout England. He standardized coinage and weights to help trade flourish. He held regular councils where nobles and church leaders could discuss important matters. These councils helped unite the different regions under common governance. Athelstan also formed diplomatic relationships with rulers across Europe. He arranged marriages between his sisters and important continental leaders. One sister married Otto, who later became Holy Roman Emperor. The church supported Athelstan strongly. He gave generously to monasteries and promoted religious reform. In return, church leaders helped legitimize his rule and spread his authority. Athelstan collected relics from across Europe. He displayed them at his court to show his prestige and connections. He wanted everyone to see that England was now a major European power. When Athelstan died in 939, he left behind a united kingdom. England would face challenges ahead. including more Viking invasions. But the idea of one English nation was now established. Future kings might lose territory temporarily, but they would always claim to rule all of England. Athelstan had created something that would endure. The weak rulers in Danish invasions return Athelstan died in 939 without any children. His brother Edmund became king, but he faced immediate problems. The Vikings in Dublin saw an opportunity. They invaded northern England and recaptured York within months. Everything Athelstan had achieved in the north seemed to vanish overnight. Edmund spent years fighting to win back control. He eventually succeeded, but it showed how fragile English unity really was. Strong leadership was essential to keep the kingdom together. Edmund was murdered in 946 by an outlaw at a feast. He was only 25 years old. His brother Ethelred took over and continued the struggle against Viking rebellion. Ethelred managed to maintain control, but he was often sick. He died in 955 after just 9 years on the throne. The kingdom passed to Edmund's teenage son, Edwig. Edwig was young and inexperienced. He quarrelled with church leaders and powerful nobles. The kingdom actually split in two for a while, with his brother Edgar ruling the north. Edwig died in 959 at just 19 years old. Edgar reunited the kingdom and proved to be a capable ruler. He maintained peace and strengthened royal authority throughout England. Edgar's reign was the calm before the storm. He died unexpectedly in 975 at only 32. His son Edward was murdered just 3 years later by supporters of his half-brother. The half-brother became King Ethelred in 978. He was only 10 years old. England now had a child king at exactly the wrong time. The Vikings were coming back. A new generation of raiders from Scandinavia had been watching England closely. They saw weakness and opportunity. Small Viking raids started appearing along the English coast in the 980s. These weren't settlers looking for land. They were professional warriors seeking treasure. The raids grew larger each year. English defences, so strong under Alfred and his descendants, had deteriorated. The burh system wasn't maintained properly. The navy had been neglected. In 991, a large Viking army landed in Essex. They defeated the English forces at the Battle of Maldon. The English commander died fighting bravely, but his army was destroyed. Ethelred made a fateful decision after this defeat. Instead of fighting, he decided to pay the Vikings to leave. This payment was called Danegeld. The Vikings took the money and sailed away, but they came back the next year demanding more. Ethelred paid again. This pattern repeated year after year. The payments grew larger each time. The Vikings realised they could get rich without even fighting much. English nobles resented paying tribute to raiders. The common people suffered as heavy taxes were collected to fund the payments. The kingdom's wealth drained away. Some Vikings stopped raiding entirely. They just waited for their annual payment. It was easier than fighting, but not all Vikings were satisfied with tribute. In 702, Ethelred heard rumours that Danish settlers in England were plotting against him. He ordered a massacre of Danes living in England on St. Brice's Day. Many innocent people died. Among them was the sister of Sweyn Forkbeard, the King of Denmark. Sweyn was furious and vowed revenge. Sweyn launched a full-scale invasion of England. This wasn't a raid for treasure. He wanted to conquer the entire kingdom. The Danish invasions had returned in full force, and England had no strong leader to resist them. Ethelred the Unready loses control to the Danes. Sweyn Forkbeard arrived in England with a massive army in 1003. His invasion was personal revenge for the massacre of Danes 2 years earlier. Ethelred tried to organise resistance, but his nobles didn't trust him. Years of failed leadership had destroyed confidence in the king. Many regions refused to send troops. Sweyn's forces ravaged the countryside. They burned towns and collected tribute from terrified populations. Ethelred continued his strategy of paying the Danes to leave. The payments reached enormous sums. In 1012, England paid £48,000 of silver to the Danish army. That was more wealth than most kingdoms possessed entirely. Even worse, the payments didn't work anymore. The Danes took the money but didn't leave. They had realised England was too weak to resist. Ethelred's nickname, the Unready, didn't mean he was unprepared. The Old English word unread meant poorly advised or lacking good counsel. His decisions were consistently terrible. He alienated powerful nobles who could have helped him. He executed some advisers and exiled others. The few capable leaders left refused to serve him. In 1013, Sweyn returned for a final invasion. This time he didn't just want tribute. He wanted the crown itself. Sweyn landed in the north and marched south. Town after town submitted without fighting. The English people were exhausted from years of war and taxation. By the end of 1013, Sweyn controlled most of England. Ethelred fled to Normandy, where his wife's family ruled. The English nobles formally accepted Sweyn as their king. But Sweyn's reign lasted only 5 weeks. He died suddenly in February 1014. No one knows exactly what killed him, though some claimed illness. The Danish army wanted Sweyn's son Cnut to become king. But the English nobles saw an opportunity. They invited Ethelred back on the condition that he rule more justly. Ethelred returned and immediately broke his promises. He attacked nobles who had submitted to Sweyn. He continued making poor decisions and alienating supporters. Cnut invaded again in 1015. He was young, but already an experienced military commander. He had learned from his father's campaigns. Ethelred's son Edmund, called Edmund Ironside, proved to be a capable warrior. He led English forces against Cnut with some success. Edmund was everything his father wasn't: brave, decisive, and respected. But Ethelred died in April 1016 while the war was still raging. Edmund became king, but the kingdom was divided. Some regions supported him while others backed Cnut. Edmund and Cnut fought several battles throughout 1016. Neither could gain a decisive advantage. The fighting devastated the countryside and exhausted both armies. Finally they met at the Battle of Asandun in October 1016. The battle was fierce, but Cnut's forces won. Edmund's army was shattered. Edmund and Cnut agreed to split the kingdom. Edmund would rule Wessex in the south, while Cnut controlled the rest. But the agreement included a crucial clause. When one king died, the other would inherit everything. Edmund died just 1 month later in November 1016. He was only about 27 years old. Some suspected murder, but no proof exists. Cnut became king of all England. The line of Alfred the Great had finally been broken after nearly 150 years. A Danish king now sat on the English throne. Cnut the Great rules. England as a Danish king Cnut was only about 20 years old when he became king of England in 1016. Many English nobles expected him to rule like a foreign conqueror. They were wrong. Cnut surprised everyone by becoming one of England's most effective kings. He understood that ruling through fear and force wouldn't work long term. Instead, he worked to win English support and unite the kingdom. Cnut kept many English laws and customs in place. He retained English nobles in positions of power. He didn't try to replace English culture with Danish traditions. He married Emma of Normandy, who had been Ethelred's widow. This marriage connected him to the Old English royal family and gave him legitimacy. Cnut divided England into 4 large earldoms. He appointed trusted men to govern these regions. Some were Danish, but others were English nobles who had proven their loyalty. He sent most of his Danish army back to Scandinavia. Keeping a foreign army in England was expensive and created resentment. Cnut understood he needed English support more than Danish warriors. The English people gradually accepted him. He proved to be a just ruler who enforced laws fairly. Trade flourished under his stable government. Cnut also became king of Denmark in 1018 when his brother died. Now he ruled 2 kingdoms. In 1028, he conquered Norway as well. Cnut built an empire that stretched across the North Sea. England, Denmark, and Norway all acknowledged him as king. He was the most powerful ruler in northern Europe. He travelled frequently between his kingdoms. English nobles sometimes went with him to Scandinavia. Danish nobles came to England. This mixing helped integrate his empire. Cnut was deeply religious despite his Viking heritage. He went on pilgrimage to Rome in 1027. He met the Pope and attended the coronation of the Holy Roman Emperor. He gave generously to churches and monasteries throughout England. He supported church reform and promoted education. Religious leaders praised him as a Christian king. There's a famous story about Cnut and the waves. According to legend, he had his throne placed on the beach at low tide. He commanded the waves to stop, knowing they wouldn't. When the water soaked him, he told his courtiers that only the divine power could command nature. The story shows Cnut understood the limits of royal power. Cnut ruled England for 19 years. He maintained peace and prosperity throughout most of his reign. The contrast with Ethelred's chaos was dramatic. He issued law codes that protected both English and Danish subjects equally. He didn't favour one group over another. Justice applied to everyone. Trade expanded significantly during his reign. Merchants could travel safely throughout his empire. English wool went to Scandinavia while Scandinavian goods reached England. Cnut died in 1035 at about 40 years old. His death created immediate problems. He had sons from 2 different marriages, and both claimed the throne. His empire didn't survive him. England, Denmark and Norway quickly split apart again. His sons fought each other for control of his kingdoms. Within 7 years of Cnut's death, the English throne returned to the old royal line. But Cnut had proven something important. England could be ruled successfully by someone outside the ancient Saxon dynasties. The crown depended on effective leadership, not just bloodline. Edward the Confessor restores the Saxon line. Cnut's sons fought over England after his death in 1035. Harold Harefoot ruled first, then his half-brother Harthacnut took over in 1040. Harthacnut was cruel and unpopular. He taxed the English heavily to pay for his fleet. People hated him and longed for a return to the old Saxon line. Harthacnut invited his half-brother Edward to England in 1041. Edward was the son of Ethelred the Unready and Emma of Normandy. He had lived in exile in Normandy for 25 years. Harthacnut died suddenly in 1042 at a wedding feast. He was only 24 years old. The English nobles immediately chose Edward as their new king. Edward's coronation marked the return of Alfred's bloodline to the throne. The Danish interlude was over. England had a Saxon king again. But Edward was more Norman than English. He had spent most of his life in Normandy. He spoke French better than English. He brought Norman advisors and priests with him. This created tension with powerful English nobles. The most powerful family was the Godwins. Earl Godwin of Wessex had been influential under Cnut and his sons. Godwin had enormous wealth and controlled much of southern England. His family held multiple earldoms. Edward needed Godwin's support to rule effectively. Edward married Godwin's daughter Edith in 1045. The marriage was political, designed to unite the king with his most powerful subject. But Edward and Edith never had children. Some historians believe Edward took a vow of chastity. Others think he simply disliked his wife. Either way, the lack of an heir would cause problems later. Edward favoured his Norman friends over English nobles. He appointed Normans to important positions in the church. This angered the English nobility, especially the Godwins. Tensions exploded in 1051. Edward tried to reduce Godwin's power. Godwin refused to obey a royal command. The conflict nearly led to civil war. Godwin fled to Flanders with his family. Edward seized their lands and sent Edith to a nunnery. For a brief moment, Edward ruled without the Godwins controlling him. But Godwin returned in 1052 with an army. He had too much support among the English people. Edward had to restore Godwin's lands and take Edith back. Godwin died in 1053. His son Harold became Earl of Wessex and the most powerful man in England after the king. Harold Godwinson was capable and ambitious. He commanded the English army and handled much of the kingdom's administration. Edward increasingly relied on him. Edward focused on religious matters rather than governing. He spent enormous amounts of money rebuilding Westminster Abbey. The project consumed much of his attention and the kingdom's wealth. The new abbey was grand and built in the Norman style. Edward wanted to be buried there. The church became his legacy. Edward's reign was mostly peaceful. There were no major wars or invasions. The economy grew steadily. Trade with the continent increased. But the succession problem loomed larger each year. Edward had no children. Several people could claim the throne when he died. Harold Godwinson was the obvious choice to many English nobles. He was English, powerful, and experienced. But he had no royal blood. William, Duke of Normandy, was Edward's cousin. William believed Edward had promised him the throne. The Norman connection was strong. Harold Hardrada, King of Norway, also claimed rights to the English throne. He based his claim on old agreements between earlier rulers. Edward grew ill in late 1065. He knew death was approaching. The kingdom held its breath, waiting to see who he would name as his successor. Edward died on January 5, 1066. His final words and wishes remain disputed to this day. Different sources claim he supported different successors. The stage was set for a succession crisis that would change England forever. Harold Godwinson's brief reign and fatal battle. Edward the Confessor died on January 5, 1066. The very next day, Harold Godwinson was crowned King of England. The speed was unusual but necessary. Harold and his supporters knew others would challenge his claim. They wanted him crowned before rivals could object. Harold's claim was weak in terms of bloodline. He wasn't related to the royal family, but he was the most powerful noble in England and had governed effectively for years. The Witenagemot, the Council of English Nobles, supported him. They valued practical leadership over royal blood. Harold seemed like the best choice to protect England. But Harold had enemies immediately. William of Normandy was furious. He claimed Edward had promised him the throne years earlier. William also said Harold had sworn an oath to support his claim. According to Norman sources, Harold had visited Normandy in 1064 and made this promise over holy relics. Harold denied this or claimed he was forced. Either way, William began preparing an invasion fleet in Normandy. Harold Hardrada of Norway also prepared to invade. He believed he had a legitimate claim through old treaties. He allied with Harold's own brother Tostig, who had been exiled from England. Harold spent the summer of 1066 waiting. He gathered an army in southern England and watched the coast. He expected William to arrive any day. But William's fleet was delayed by bad winds. Harold's army waited for months. Finally, in early September, supplies ran low and the troops went home to harvest their crops. That's when Harold Hardrada struck. The Norwegian king sailed up the Humber River with 300 ships. He landed in northern England with an enormous army. Harold had to march north immediately. He gathered whatever forces he could and moved fast. He covered 200 miles in just 4 days. Harold surprised the Norwegian army at Stamford Bridge on September 25th. The Norwegians weren't expecting him. Many weren't even wearing armour. The battle was brutal but decisive. The English army destroyed the Norwegian forces. Harold Hardrada died fighting along with Tostig. It was a complete English victory. Harold had saved England from one invasion. But he had no time to celebrate. 3 days after Stamford Bridge, William landed in southern England. The winds that had delayed him for months finally changed direction. Harold received the news in Yorkshire. He had to march his exhausted army 200 miles south to face a fresh enemy. Harold reached London by October 6th. He gathered reinforcements but didn't wait long. He marched toward William's position near Hastings. Harold's advisors urged him to wait. His army was tired from the march and the previous battle. More troops were coming from other regions, but Harold pushed forward. He may have wanted to surprise William like he surprised Harold, or perhaps he wanted to protect the southern countryside from Norman raids. The armies met on October 14th, near a place called Senlac Hill. Harold positioned his forces on high ground behind a shield wall. William attacked uphill repeatedly. The English shield wall held firm. Norman cavalry charges broke against the English line. The battle lasted all day. Both sides fought desperately. The outcome remained uncertain for hours. Then, late in the afternoon, Harold fell. Sources disagree on exactly how he died. Some say an arrow struck him in the eye. Others describe him being cut down by Norman knights. With their king dead, the English army broke. Soldiers fled into the forest. The Normans pursued and killed many. Harold's brothers died in the battle too. The Godwinson family's power was destroyed in a single day. Harold had ruled for just 9 months. His reign began and ended in 1066, the most famous year in English history. William of Normandy had won the crown, and England would never be the same. William the Conqueror claims the English throne. William won the Battle of Hastings, but that didn't make him King of England. He still had to conquer the rest of the country. He expected English nobles to submit immediately after Harold's death. Most didn't. They gathered in London and considered choosing a new English king. William marched toward London but didn't attack directly. Instead, he circled the city, burning and destroying everything in his path. The devastation was deliberate. William wanted to show what would happen to those who resisted. Town after town surrendered as his army approached. London's leaders realised they couldn't win. One by one, English nobles came to William and submitted. They had no army left to fight him. William was crowned king on Christmas Day 1066. The ceremony took place in Westminster Abbey, the church Edward the Confessor had built. During the coronation, Norman soldiers outside heard shouting from inside the abbey. They thought it was a riot and started setting fire to nearby buildings. The ceremony continued despite the chaos. William became king, but the incident showed how tense the situation remained. William kept many English nobles in their positions initially. He hoped to rule through cooperation rather than force alone. But rebellion started within months. English nobles in different regions refused to accept Norman rule. They attacked Norman soldiers and tax collectors. William responded with overwhelming force. When the North rebelled in 1069, he destroyed entire communities. This campaign became known as the Harrying of the North. Villages were burned, food stores were destroyed, livestock was slaughtered. William wanted to ensure the North could never rebel again. Thousands died from starvation that winter. The devastation was so complete that some areas remained wasteland for decades. William gradually replaced English nobles with Norman followers. When English lords died or rebelled, Normans took their lands. By 1071, almost all major landowners in England were Norman. The entire English aristocracy had been replaced in just 5 years. William ordered a complete survey of England in 1085. Officials recorded who owned every piece of land and what it was worth. This record became known as the Domesday Book. The survey showed William's control was absolute. It also helped him collect taxes more efficiently. Every village and farm was documented. William built castles throughout England. These stone fortresses controlled strategic locations and intimidated local populations. Norman soldiers garrisoned these castles permanently. The most famous was the Tower of London. William began construction in 1078. The massive stone keep dominated the city and reminded everyone who was in charge. Norman French became the language of the court and government. English continued among common people, but anyone seeking power needed to speak French. The church changed too. William replaced English bishops with Norman clergy. Church services and documents used Latin, but church administration spoke French. English culture didn't disappear, but it was pushed down in society. The elite were Norman. The peasants remained English. William spent much of his time in Normandy. He was still duke there and had to defend his lands from French attacks. He left England in the hands of trusted deputies. These men enforced his will and collected his taxes. William returned only when necessary to crush rebellions. William died in 1087 from injuries received in a riding accident. He was about 60 years old. He had ruled England for 21 years. His conquest had fundamentally transformed England. The Saxon era was truly over. Norman customs, language and law replaced English traditions. William divided his lands between his sons. Robert received Normandy. William Rufus became King of England. Henry got money but no land initially. The conquest William began would shape England for centuries. The Norman kings who followed would continue his policies. England was now connected to continental Europe in ways it never had been before. The Norman kings reshape England's power structure. William Rufus became King of England in 1087 after his father died. His older brother Robert inherited Normandy. This division created immediate problems. Many Norman nobles owned lands in both England and Normandy. They didn't want to serve two different masters. Some rebelled, trying to unite the territories under Robert. William Rufus crushed the rebellion quickly. He proved to be a strong military leader like his father, but he was far less popular. The church hated him. William Rufus taxed churches heavily and left bishop positions empty so he could collect their revenues. He openly mocked religious leaders. He never married and had no children. Rumours spread about his personal life. Church chroniclers wrote harsh things about him, calling him immoral and greedy. But William Rufus was an effective ruler in practical terms. He kept England secure and expanded royal power. He built on the administrative systems his father created. He also took advantage when Robert decided to go on crusade in 1096. Robert needed money for the journey, so William Rufus loaned him cash in exchange for temporary control of Normandy. Now William Rufus controlled both territories. He ruled them efficiently and increased royal revenues significantly. The Norman dominions were united under one ruler again. William Rufus died in 1100 during a hunting accident. An arrow struck him in the chest. Whether it was truly an accident remains debated. His younger brother Henry was hunting with him that day. Henry immediately rode to Winchester and seized the royal treasury. He was crowned king within 3 days. Henry the Thon proved to be the most capable of William the Conqueror's sons. He was educated and understood both warfare and administration. Robert returned from crusade and challenged Henry's claim. The brothers fought for 6 years. Henry finally defeated Robert at the Battle of Tinchebray in 1106. Henry imprisoned Robert for the rest of his life. Robert spent 28 years in captivity until his death. Henry now controlled both England and Normandy without question. Henry reorganised royal government completely. He created the Exchequer, a department that managed royal finances systematically. Officials met twice yearly to audit accounts. The Exchequer used a checkered cloth like a chessboard to calculate taxes. Counters moved across the board representing different amounts. This made complex accounting visual and manageable. Henry expanded the system of royal justices. These officials travelled throughout England hearing cases and enforcing royal law. Local lords had less power to judge cases independently. He standardised royal writs, written orders that commanded specific actions. These writs became the foundation of English common law. Henry issued the Charter of Liberties when he became king. This document promised to end abusive practices and govern justly. It was a political move to gain support, but it set important precedents. The Charter promised fair treatment under law. It limited arbitrary royal power. Over a century later, these ideas would influence the Magna Carta. Henry married Matilda of Scotland in 1100. She was descended from the Old English royal line. This marriage connected the Norman dynasty to Saxon ancestors. Their children would have both Norman and English royal blood. Henry hoped this would make his family more acceptable to English people. Henry ruled for 35 years. His reign was mostly peaceful and prosperous. Trade expanded. Towns grew larger. The economy strengthened considerably. But Henry faced one major failure. He had many children, but only one legitimate son. Everything depended on that boy surviving to inherit the throne. The administrative systems Henry created would outlast him. The Exchequer continued operating for centuries. Royal justices became a permanent feature of English government. Henry transformed England from a conquered territory into an organised kingdom. The Norman military occupation evolved into sophisticated royal administration. England had a government structure that could function even when kings were weak or absent. Henry thus secures the succession through his daughter. Henry thus had one legitimate son named William Adelin. The boy was being groomed to inherit England and Normandy. Everything was planned for a smooth succession. In 1120, William sailed from Normandy to England aboard a ship called the White Ship. The vessel was new and fast, the crew was experienced, but the sailors had been drinking. They tried to overtake other ships and show off their speed. The White Ship struck a rock and sank quickly. William Adelin drowned along with 2 of Henry's illegitimate children and 300 other passengers. Only 1 person survived. Henry was devastated when he heard the news. According to chroniclers, he never smiled again. More importantly, he now had no male heir. Henry had one legitimate daughter named Matilda. She was about 18 years old and married to the Holy Roman Emperor. She lived in Germany. Her husband died in 1125. Matilda returned to her father's court as a widow. Henry now made a controversial decision. He declared that Matilda would inherit the throne after his death. In 1127 he forced his barons to swear oaths accepting her as his heir. The barons didn't like this. England had never had a ruling queen. Women weren't expected to lead armies or govern kingdoms. But the barons swore their oaths anyway. They had no choice. Henry was still powerful and healthy. They hoped he might remarry and have another son. Henry arranged a second marriage for Matilda in 1128. She married Geoffrey of Anjou, a count from a powerful French family. Matilda hated this marriage. She had been an empress, one of the highest ranks in Europe. Now she was a mere countess married to someone younger than herself. Geoffrey was only 15 when they married. Matilda was 26. The marriage was purely political, designed to create an alliance between Normandy and Anjou. The couple fought constantly. They separated several times. But they had 3 sons, including Henry, born in 1133. Henry I made the barons swear their oaths to Matilda again in 1131. He wanted to ensure everyone remembered their promise, but doubts remained. Matilda lived in Anjou with Geoffrey. Many English barons barely knew her. She had spent most of her life outside England. Henry's nephew Stephen of Blois had a competing claim. Stephen's mother was William the Conqueror's daughter. Stephen had grown up in Henry's court and was well liked. Stephen also held large estates in England. He was familiar to the barons. He had sworn to support Matilda, but that oath might not hold if circumstances changed. Henry thus died in December 1135 after eating too many lampreys. He was 67 years old. His death triggered exactly the succession crisis he had tried to prevent. Matilda was in Anjou when she received the news. She couldn't reach England quickly. She was also pregnant with her 3rd child. Stephen was in Boulogne, much closer to England. He crossed the Channel immediately and rode to London. The citizens of London supported Stephen. So did his brother Henry, who was Bishop of Winchester and controlled the royal treasury. Stephen was crowned king on December 22nd, 1135, just 3 weeks after Henry thus died. He claimed that Henry had changed his mind on his deathbed and named Stephen as heir. Most barons accepted Stephen quickly. They preferred him over a woman they barely knew. The oaths they swore to Henry I seemed less important than practical considerations, but Matilda never accepted Stephen's claim. Neither did her half-brother Robert, Earl of Gloucester, one of the most powerful barons in England. Henry had worked for 35 years to secure a peaceful succession. Despite his planning and forced oaths, civil war was now inevitable. The Anarchy. Stephen and Matilda's civil war. Stephen ruled unopposed for almost 3 years. Most barons had accepted him as king. Matilda remained in Anjou, unable to challenge him immediately. But in 1138, Robert of Gloucester renounced his allegiance to Stephen. Robert was Matilda's half-brother and one of the most powerful men in England. Robert's defection changed everything. Other barons who had doubts about Stephen now had a leader to rally behind. Matilda landed in England in September 1139. She brought a small army and immediately established a base in the West Country. England split into regions supporting different rulers. Some areas backed Stephen. Others supported Matilda. Many barons switched sides repeatedly, seeking the best advantage. Stephen made critical mistakes early. He arrested several powerful bishops, including Roger of Salisbury, who had run Henry I's government. This alienated the church. The Pope's representative threatened to excommunicate Stephen. Church support shifted toward Matilda. In February 1141, Stephen's army met Matilda's forces at the Battle of Lincoln. The fighting was fierce, but Stephen's troops were defeated. Stephen himself was captured during the battle. He was imprisoned in chains. Matilda seemed to have won. Matilda entered London in triumph. Preparations began for her coronation. She would finally become queen in fact, not just in claim. But Matilda made her own mistakes. She demanded heavy taxes from London immediately. She refused to grant favours to important nobles. She acted arrogantly toward people whose support she needed. The citizens of London turned against her. A mob drove her from the city before she could be crowned. Her victory vanished in weeks. Stephen's wife, also named Matilda, had been raising an army. She besieged Robert of Gloucester and captured him. The two sides negotiated an exchange. Stephen was released in return for Robert. By November 1141, Stephen was free and fighting again. The war dragged on for years after this. Neither side could gain a decisive advantage. England descended into chaos. Barons built unauthorised castles throughout the kingdom. These fortifications served as bases for private armies. Royal authority collapsed in many regions. Local lords fought each other and raided neighbouring territories. They ignored royal commands from both Stephen and Matilda. The common people suffered terribly. Armies from both sides seized food and supplies. Fields went unploughed because farmers feared soldiers would steal their harvest. Contemporary chroniclers described widespread starvation. They wrote of villages abandoned and churches robbed. One chronicler said people openly claimed that Christ and his saints were asleep. The war became a stalemate. Stephen controlled the southeast, including London. Matilda held the southwest. Neither could defeat the other. By 1148, Matilda was exhausted. She returned to Normandy, effectively giving up. But the war wasn't over. Matilda's son Henry was now 15 years old. He began leading campaigns in England on his mother's behalf. He proved to be a capable military leader. Henry was also Duke of Normandy now, and had married Eleanor of Aquitaine, making him one of the most powerful nobles in France. Stephen's own son Eustace was his designated heir, but Eustace died suddenly in 1153. Stephen had no other legitimate sons. Stephen and Henry negotiated peace in November 1153. The Treaty of Wallingford stated that Stephen would remain king for his lifetime, but Henry would inherit the throne after his death. Stephen died in October 1154, just 11 months after the treaty. He was about 60 years old. The Civil War had lasted 19 years. It destroyed the strong government Henry I had built. England needed a powerful king to restore order, and Henry II would prove to be exactly that. Henry II founds the Plantagenet dynasty. Henry II became king in 1154 at age 21. He inherited a kingdom devastated by 19 years of civil war. Unauthorised castles dotted the landscape. Local barons ruled like independent warlords. Royal authority had collapsed in many regions. Henry acted quickly. He ordered the destruction of all castles built without royal permission. Barons who resisted were attacked and forced to comply. He expelled foreign mercenaries who had fought during the Civil War. These soldiers had terrorised the countryside for years. Henry wanted them gone immediately. Henry already controlled vast territories in France. He was Duke of Normandy and Anjou through his parents. His marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine gave him control of southwest France. Henry's French lands were actually larger than the territory he held as King of France. This made him more powerful than his own feudal overlord. His dynasty became known as Plantagenet, named after the sprig of broom plant his father wore. The Plantagenets would rule England for over 300 years. Henry restored the government systems his grandfather Henry the Fong had created. The exchequer reopened and began collecting taxes efficiently. Royal justices travelled throughout England again. Henry expanded the role of royal courts significantly. He wanted more cases heard by royal judges rather than local lords. This increased royal power and created more consistent justice. He introduced new legal procedures. The jury system began developing during his reign. Groups of local people would declare facts about disputes and crimes. Henry also reformed church courts. He believed clergy who committed crimes should be punished by royal courts, not just church authorities. This brought him into conflict with Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Becket had been Henry's friend and chancellor, but opposed him on church independence. The conflict escalated for years. In 1170, Henry supposedly said something like, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" 4 knights took this as a command. They rode to Canterbury Cathedral and murdered Becket at the altar. The killing shocked all of Europe. Becket became a martyr and was quickly declared a saint. Henry had to do public penance for the murder. He walked barefoot to Canterbury and let monks whip him. His authority over church courts was significantly reduced. Despite this setback, Henry continued strengthening royal power. He conquered Ireland in 1171, beginning centuries of English involvement there. Henry's sons proved to be his greatest problem. They rebelled against him repeatedly, often with support from their mother Eleanor and the French king. Henry died in 1189, defeated by his own son Richard. He was 56 years old and had ruled for 35 years. He left behind a powerful, well-organised kingdom and a dynasty that would endure. Richard the Lionheart leaves England for the Crusades. Richard became king in 1189 after his father Henry II died. He was 31 years old and already famous as a warrior. Richard had spent most of his life fighting in France. He knew warfare and little else. Governing bored him. Administration seemed like a waste of time. He viewed England primarily as a source of money. He needed enormous funds for a crusade to the Holy Land. Jerusalem had fallen to Saladin in 1187. Richard spent only 6 months in England during his entire 10-year reign. He learned minimal English and preferred speaking French. He sold everything he could to raise crusade funds. Offices, lands, and titles all went to the highest bidder. Richard joked he would sell London itself if he could find a buyer. He appointed capable administrators to run England while he was gone. William Longchamp served as Chief Justiciar, essentially ruling in Richard's absence. Richard left for the Crusade in December 1189. He travelled through France and Italy, then sailed to the Holy Land. He wouldn't return to England for 4 years. The Third Crusade became Richard's great achievement. He captured several cities and won multiple battles against Saladin's forces. Richard's military reputation grew legendary. Muslims respected his courage and tactical skill. Stories spread about his strength and fighting ability. He came close to recapturing Jerusalem but never quite succeeded. Supply problems and disagreements with other crusade leaders prevented final victory. Richard negotiated a 3-year truce with Saladin in 1192. Christian pilgrims could visit Jerusalem safely. Richard could claim partial success. But disaster struck on his journey home. Richard was shipwrecked in the Adriatic Sea. He tried to travel through Austria in disguise, but was captured. Duke Leopold of Austria handed Richard over to the Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI. The emperor demanded an enormous ransom for Richard's release. England had to raise 150,000 marks, an incredible sum. Special taxes were levied throughout the kingdom. Churches donated treasures. Everyone contributed. Richard's brother John tried to take the throne while Richard was imprisoned. John allied with Philip Augustus, the King of France. But Richard's officials in England remained loyal. They kept the government functioning and raised the ransom money. England proved it could operate without its king present. Richard was released in 1194 after 14 months of captivity. He returned to England briefly, then left again to fight in France. John had been plotting with Philip Augustus against Richard. Richard quickly defeated John's supporters and forgave his brother. Richard spent his final 5 years fighting to protect his French territories. Philip Augustus was constantly trying to seize Norman lands. In 1199, Richard besieged a small castle in Limousin. A crossbow bolt struck him in the shoulder. The wound became infected. Richard died on April 6, 1198. He was 41 years old. He had spent perhaps a total of 6 months in England during his entire reign. Despite his absence, Richard remained popular in England. People remembered his military glory and crusading reputation. They forgave his neglect because he seemed heroic. Richard left no legitimate children. His brother John inherited the throne, and England would soon learn what a truly bad king looked like. King John signs the Magna Carta under pressure. John became king in 1199 after Richard died. He was Richard's younger brother and had already proven himself untrustworthy. John immediately faced challenges to his rule. His nephew Arthur had a strong claim to the throne. Many barons in France supported Arthur instead. John captured Arthur in 1202 during fighting in Normandy. Arthur disappeared shortly after. Most people assumed John had murdered him. John's problems in France multiplied quickly. Philip Augustus of France declared John's French lands forfeit and invaded Normandy. John lost Normandy in 1204. He also lost Anjou and most other French territories his family had held for generations. English barons who owned Norman lands were furious. John tried repeatedly to win back his French territories. Each attempt required heavy taxation in England. The barons grew increasingly resentful. John quarrelled with Pope Innocent III over who should be Archbishop of Canterbury. The Pope placed England under interdict in 1208. The interdict meant no church services could be performed, no marriages, baptisms or burials. This religious punishment lasted 6 years and frightened many people. John finally submitted to the Pope in 1213. He accepted the Pope's choice for Archbishop and agreed to hold England as a papal fief. John launched another campaign to recover his French lands in 1214. He allied with the Holy Roman Emperor against Philip Augustus. The campaign ended in complete disaster at the Battle of Bouvines. Philip defeated John's allies decisively. John's dreams of recovering Normandy died permanently. The barons had endured enough. Years of heavy taxes had achieved nothing. John had lost wars repeatedly and quarrelled with the church. Many barons also resented John's arbitrary use of power. He seized lands without proper legal process. He demanded excessive payments for inheritances. A group of barons rebelled in early 1215. They captured London in May. John's support collapsed rapidly. John had no choice but to negotiate. The rebel barons presented a list of demands. They wanted limits on royal power written into law. The two sides met at Runnymede, a meadow beside the Thames River, in June 1215. After several days of negotiation, John agreed to the barons' terms. The document became known as Magna Carta, Latin for Great Charter. It contained 63 clauses limiting royal authority. The charter stated that the king must obey the law like everyone else. He couldn't imprison people or seize property without proper legal process. It guaranteed that justice wouldn't be sold, denied, or delayed. Free men had rights that even the king must respect. The charter protected church rights and limited the taxes John could collect without baronial consent. It established that arbitrary royal power was illegal. John had no intention of keeping these promises. He wrote to the Pope asking to be released from the agreement. The Pope declared Magna Carta invalid. Civil war erupted again within months. The barons invited Prince Louis of France to invade and become king. French troops landed in England. John died in October 1216 during this war. He was 49 years old. He left England divided and a French prince controlling much of the south. But Magna Carta survived John. Future kings would reissue it repeatedly. The principle that royal power had legal limits became fundamental to English government. Henry III's long reign and growing parliament. John died in 1216, leaving his 9-year-old son Henry as king. England was in the middle of a civil war with French troops occupying London. A council of barons governed for young Henry. They reissued Magna Carta immediately to show the new government would respect baronial rights. This strategy worked. Most rebel barons switched sides and supported Henry. The French Prince Louis was defeated and forced to leave England. Henry took full control of the government in 1227 when he turned 20. He ruled for another 56 years, making his reign one of England's longest. Henry was religious and artistic, but politically weak. He spent vast amounts of money on Westminster Abbey, rebuilding it in grand Gothic style. He also gave positions and money to his French relatives. His wife was from Provence, and her family received estates and offices. English barons resented these foreigners. Henry tried repeatedly to recover his family's lost French territories. Each campaign failed and required heavy taxation. The barons grew increasingly frustrated. By 1258, the barons had enough. They forced Henry to agree to the provisions of Oxford, which limited royal power significantly. A council of 15 barons would advise the king and control major decisions. The king couldn't make important choices without their approval. Henry agreed, but soon tried to escape these restrictions. He asked the Pope to release him from the provisions. Civil war erupted in 1264. Simon de Montfort led the rebel barons. He defeated and captured Henry at the Battle of Lewes. For a brief time, Simon effectively ruled England. Simon summoned a parliament in 1265 that included not just barons and bishops, but also representatives from towns and counties. This was revolutionary. Common people had never been represented in government before. Simon's parliament established the principle that broader groups should have a voice. But Simon's rule didn't last. Henry's son Edward escaped captivity and raised an army. He defeated and killed Simon at the Battle of Evesham. Henry was restored to power, but Edward actually controlled the government. Henry died in 1272 at age 65. Henry's reign saw Parliament evolve from occasional baronial councils into a more regular institution. Kings still held most power, but they increasingly needed consent for taxes. The idea that government should include representatives beyond just the king and great nobles had taken root. Edward them conquers Wales and fights Scotland. Edward them became king in 1272 while returning from a crusade. He was 33 years old and already experienced in government and warfare. Edward was tall and imposing, unlike his father Henry III. He commanded respect through force of personality and military skill. He spent his first years reforming English law and administration. He issued numerous statutes clarifying legal procedures and strengthening royal justice. Edward regularly summoned parliaments to approve taxes and discuss kingdom business. These gatherings included barons, bishops, and representatives from counties and towns. The model parliament of 1295 included all these groups together. This became the standard form for future parliaments. But Edward's main focus was military expansion. Wales had never been fully conquered. Welsh princes ruled independently in the mountains. Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, Prince of Wales, refused to acknowledge Edward as his overlord. Edward invaded Wales in 1277 with overwhelming force. Llywelyn submitted and lost most of his territory, but he rebelled again in 1282. This time Edward determined to conquer Wales completely. Edward's army killed Llywelyn in battle. His brother Dafydd continued resisting but was captured and executed. Welsh independence ended. Edward built massive castles throughout Wales to ensure English control. Caernarfon, Conwy and Harlech still stand today as monuments to his conquest. He gave his infant son the title Prince of Wales in 1301. English heirs to the throne have held this title ever since. Edward then turned his attention to Scotland. The Scottish king died in 1286, leaving his young granddaughter as heir. She died in 1290, travelling to Scotland. Scotland had no clear heir. Multiple nobles claimed the throne. They asked Edward to judge between the competing claims. Edward chose John Balliol, but treated him as a subordinate vassal. He demanded Scottish troops for his wars and overruled Scottish courts. Balliol rebelled in 1296, allying with France. Edward invaded Scotland and defeated Balliol's forces quickly. He captured the Stone of Scone, used in Scottish coronations. Edward believed he had conquered Scotland just like Wales. But Scottish resistance continued under new leaders like William Wallace. Wallace won a stunning victory at Stirling Bridge in 1297. Edward had to return and defeat Wallace personally at Falkirk in 1298. The wars dragged on for years. Edward kept campaigning in Scotland, trying to crush all resistance. The costs were enormous. Edward died in 1307 while marching north for another Scottish campaign. He was 68 years old. He had failed to conquer Scotland despite years of effort. Edward left behind a strengthened parliament, a conquered Wales, and an unfinished war in Scotland that would plague his son. Edward II's weak rule ends in deposition. Edward III became king in 1307 at age 23. He was completely unlike his formidable father. Edward III preferred entertainment and favourites over governing. His first act was making his friend Piers Gaveston the Earl of Cornwall. This angered the barons who saw Gaveston as a low-born foreigner. Edward and Gaveston were extremely close. Many suspected a romantic relationship. Edward gave Gaveston jewels, lands and power that should have gone to established nobles. The barons forced Edward to exile Gaveston in 1308, but Edward brought him back within months. This pattern repeated several times. Finally, in 1312, a group of barons captured and executed Gaveston. Edward was devastated but powerless to punish them. Edward still had to deal with Scotland. Robert Bruce had crowned himself king there and was winning territory back from English control. Edward invaded Scotland in 1314 with a large army. The two forces met at Bannockburn. The Scottish army destroyed Edward's forces completely. Bannockburn was a disaster for English prestige. Scotland's independence was effectively secured. Edward returned home humiliated. England suffered from bad harvests and famine between 1315 and 1322. Thousands died from starvation. Edward's government seemed unable to manage the crisis. Edward found new favourites, Hugh Despenser and his son. They dominated the government just like Gaveston had. Once again, the barons resented being pushed aside. Civil war broke out in 1321. The barons tried to force Edward to remove the Despensers. Edward fought back and actually won this time. He executed or exiled the rebel barons. For a brief period, Edward controlled the kingdom more firmly, but his success didn't last. Edward's wife, Isabella, was unhappy. She hated the Despensers and felt ignored by her husband. In 1325, she travelled to France and refused to return. Isabella began an affair with Roger Mortimer, an exiled English baron. Together they plotted to overthrow Edward. They invaded England in 1326 with a small army. Support for Edward collapsed immediately. Nobody wanted to fight for him. The Despensers were captured and brutally executed. Edward fled but was caught and imprisoned. Parliament forced him to abdicate in January 1327. Edward's 14-year-old son became King Edward III. Isabella and Mortimer ruled as regents, controlling the boy king. Edward II was held prisoner in Berkeley Castle. He died there in September 1327 under mysterious circumstances. Most historians believe he was murdered. Edward II's reign was catastrophic. He lost Scotland, alienated his barons, and became the first English king since the Norman conquest to be forcibly deposed. His weakness demonstrated that even kings could be removed if they ruled badly enough. Edward III starts the 100 Years' War with France. Edward III became king in 1327 at age 14. His mother Isabella and her lover Roger Mortimer controlled the government and made all decisions. Edward resented being treated like a puppet. In 1330 he acted decisively. He arrested Mortimer at Nottingham Castle and had him executed for treason. Isabella was forced into retirement. Edward, now 18, took full control of his kingdom. He proved to be everything his father wasn't: strong, capable, and popular. Edward's first military success came against Scotland. He defeated the Scots at Halidon Hill in 1333 and installed a puppet king. But Edward's ambitions soon turned toward France. The French king, Charles IV, had died in 1328 without sons. Edward believed he had a claim through his mother. Isabella was the sister of the dead French king. Edward argued this made him the rightful heir. The French rejected this claim entirely. They said the crown couldn't pass through a female line. They chose Philip VI, a cousin of the dead king, instead. Edward accepted this decision initially. He even paid homage to Philip for his French territories. But tensions grew over the following years. Philip supported Scottish independence against English interests. He also threatened to confiscate Gascony, Edward's valuable territory in southwest France. In 1337, Philip declared Gascony forfeit. Edward responded by claiming the French throne for himself. The 100 Years' War had begun. Edward couldn't invade France directly. Instead, he built alliances with French nobles and German princes. He spent enormous sums creating a coalition against Philip. The war started badly. Edward's continental allies proved unreliable, and his campaigns achieved little. England was spending money with few results. Everything changed in 1340 at the Battle of Slees. Edward's fleet destroyed the French navy. England now controlled the English Channel. Edward invaded France in 1346. His army was outnumbered but used longbowmen devastatingly. At Crécy, English archers slaughtered French knights charging uphill. The victory shocked Europe. Knights in armour were supposed to be invincible. English commoners with bows had destroyed them. Edward besieged and captured Calais in 1347. This port city would remain English for over 200 years. Edward's son, the Black Prince, continued these successes. He won another crushing victory at Poitiers in 1356, even capturing the French king. England forced humiliating treaties on France. Edward gained vast territories and enormous ransoms. He seemed unstoppable. But the war dragged on for decades. France slowly recovered territory under new leadership. By Edward's death in 1377, most English gains had been lost. Edward III had started a conflict that would define both kingdoms for generations. The war he began wouldn't truly end until 1453. Richard II's tyranny leads to his overthrow. Richard VI became king in 1377 at age 10 after his grandfather Edward III died. His father, the Black Prince, had died the year before. A council of nobles governed during Richard's minority. England was exhausted from decades of war with France and facing social unrest at home. The Peasants' Revolt erupted in 1381. High taxes and social restrictions after the Black Death had created widespread anger among common people. A rebel army marched on London demanding changes. 14-year-old Richard rode out to meet them personally. He promised reforms and the rebels dispersed. Richard then broke his promises and crushed the rebellion violently. This showed a pattern that would mark his entire reign, making agreements he never intended to keep. Richard took full control of government in 1389. He was 22 and determined to rule as an absolute monarch without baronial interference. For several years, Richard governed reasonably well. He made peace with France and focused on building a magnificent court culture. But Richard never forgot that some barons had restricted his power during his youth. He wanted revenge and complete control. In 1397, Richard moved against his enemies. He arrested 3 senior nobles called the Lords Appellant, who had once opposed him. One was executed. The others were exiled or imprisoned. Richard seized their lands and redistributed them to his favourites. Richard forced Parliament to grant him customs revenues for life. He created a personal guard of Cheshire archers who intimidated his opponents. He demanded forced loans from wealthy subjects. Those who refused faced imprisonment or worse. Richard was ruling through fear and arbitrary power. In 1398, Richard exiled his cousin Henry Bolingbroke over a minor dispute. When Henry's father died in 1399, Richard seized all his estates. This was a catastrophic mistake. Henry was Duke of Lancaster and controlled vast lands. Other nobles realised their own property wasn't safe. Richard then left for a campaign in Ireland. Henry saw his opportunity. He invaded England in July 1399, claiming he only wanted his inheritance back. Support for Richard collapsed instantly. Nobles who feared for their own lands joined Henry. Nobody wanted to defend a king who seized property arbitrarily. Richard returned from Ireland to find his kingdom lost. His army deserted. He was captured and forced to abdicate in September 1399. Henry Bolingbroke became King Henry IV. Richard was imprisoned in Pontefract Castle. He died there in February 1400, probably murdered. Richard's deposition established an important precedent. Kings who ruled tyrannically could be removed. Parliament had approved the deposition, giving it legal legitimacy. Richard had been intelligent and capable, but also paranoid and vindictive. His inability to work with his nobles and his arbitrary seizure of property destroyed his reign. England had learned again that even kings must respect the law. Henry IV begins the House of Lancaster. Henry IV seized the throne in 1399 after forcing Richard II to abdicate. But taking the crown was easier than keeping it. Henry's claim was weak legally. His father was Edward III's third son. There were descendants of the second son with better claims by birth. Henry argued that Richard had ruled badly and forfeited the crown. Parliament accepted this reasoning and approved Henry's kingship. But this created a dangerous precedent. If bad rule justified removal, future kings could be judged and deposed too. Henry faced immediate rebellions. Richard's supporters tried to assassinate Henry at Windsor Castle in January 1400. The plot failed, but showed how unstable his position was. Richard died mysteriously in prison shortly after. Most people assumed Henry had him murdered to eliminate a rival. This suspicion haunted Henry's reputation. The Percy family, who had helped Henry take the throne, soon rebelled. They controlled the north and felt Henry hadn't rewarded them adequately. Henry Hotspur, the famous Percy warrior, raised an army in 1403. He allied with Welsh rebels under Owain Glyndwr, who were fighting for Welsh independence. Henry met Hotspur at the Battle of Shrewsbury. The fighting was fierce and close. Hotspur was killed and his army defeated, but just barely. Wales remained a problem throughout Henry's reign. Glyndwr controlled much of the country and declared himself Prince of Wales. English forces struggled to defeat the Welsh rebels. The Percy family rebelled again in 1405. This time Henry crushed them completely. The Earl of Northumberland fled to Scotland, then was killed in another failed rebellion in 1408. Henry faced constant financial pressure. Wars in Wales and against rebels drained the treasury. Parliament refused to grant sufficient taxes without concessions. Henry had to accept parliamentary oversight of royal spending. This weakened royal authority, but was necessary to get funding. Henry's health deteriorated after 1405. He suffered from a disfiguring skin disease that some interpreted as divine punishment for seizing the throne. He had seizures and periods of illness that left him unable to govern. His son, Prince Henry, gradually took over running the government. Father and son disagreed on policy frequently. The prince wanted aggressive war with France. Henry preferred cautious diplomacy to save money. The prince built his own power base and waited for his father to die. Henry IV knew his son was preparing to take over. Henry IV died in March 1413 at age 45. He had ruled for 13 difficult years marked by rebellions and financial struggles. His reign established the Lancastrian dynasty on shaky foundations. He had proven that force and parliamentary approval could make someone king even without the strongest hereditary claim. This principle would haunt England for decades. If Henry IV could take the throne by force, others could try the same. The seeds of future civil war were planted in his usurpation. Henry V achieves victory at Agincourt. Henry V became king in 1413 at age 26. His father's reign had been filled with rebellions and financial problems. Henry was determined to restore royal prestige. He had a reputation as a wild youth who spent time with criminals and drunkards. But the moment he became king, Henry transformed completely into a serious ruler. Henry's first priority was securing his position. Some nobles still questioned the Lancastrian claim to the throne. Henry needed a great achievement to unite the kingdom. He turned to France. The French were divided by civil war between rival factions. Henry saw an opportunity to revive English claims there. Henry demanded the French crown and vast territories in France. When the French refused, he prepared for war. He raised an army and landed in Normandy in August 1415. His first target was the port of Harfleur. The siege took longer than expected, and disease killed many soldiers. Henry wanted to march to Calais and return to England for winter. His army was reduced to perhaps 6,000 men, many sick and exhausted. But a French army blocked his path. They had around 30,000 soldiers, vastly outnumbering the English. Henry had to fight or surrender. The armies met near Agincourt on October 25th, 1415. The French nobles were confident. They saw an easy victory over a small, tired English force. Henry positioned his men in a narrow field between two woods. French cavalry couldn't flank them. English archers drove sharpened stakes into the ground for protection. The French knights charged repeatedly. The muddy ground slowed their horses. English arrows slaughtered them before they reached the English lines. French knights who survived the arrows got stuck in the mud wearing heavy armour. English soldiers killed them easily or took them prisoner for ransom. The battle lasted only a few hours. The French lost thousands of nobles and knights. English casualties were minimal. It was a stunning, almost impossible victory. Agincourt made Henry a legend across Europe. He had defeated overwhelming odds through tactical brilliance and the skill of English archers. Henry returned to England in triumph. Parliament granted him generous funding for more campaigns. The nobility united behind him completely. Henry invaded France again in 1417. This time he methodically conquered Normandy, taking castles and towns one by one. The campaign lasted 3 years. By 1420, Henry had forced the French king to sign the Treaty of Troyes. Henry would marry the French king's daughter and inherit France when he died. The treaty made Henry heir to both England and France. It was the greatest English diplomatic victory ever achieved. Henry seemed unstoppable. He spent the next 2 years fighting French resistance. Not everyone accepted the treaty. Henry besieged castles and defeated French forces repeatedly. But Henry fell ill in August 1422 while campaigning. He died on August 31st at age 35. He had ruled for only 9 years. Henry left behind an infant son as heir to both kingdoms. His brothers would have to complete his conquest. Henry V had achieved glory but couldn't secure his victories permanently. Henry VI's madness sparks the Wars of the Roses. Henry VI became king in 1422 when he was only 9 months old. He inherited both England and France according to his father's treaty. His uncles governed as regents during his childhood. They continued fighting in France with mixed success. The legendary Joan of Arc helped France begin recovering territory. Henry took personal control of government in 1437 at age 16. He proved to be completely unsuited for kingship. Henry was extremely pious and gentle. He hated violence and warfare. He preferred prayer and education to governing. These qualities made him a terrible medieval king. The war in France went badly. England slowly lost the territories Henry V had conquered. By 1453, only Calais remained under English control. The complete loss of France was humiliating. English nobles blamed Henry's weak leadership. They had spent decades and fortunes fighting for nothing. Henry married Margaret of Anjou in 1445. She was strong-willed and politically active, everything Henry wasn't. She increasingly made decisions for her passive husband. Noble factions formed around different advisors. The Duke of Suffolk controlled Henry initially, but he was murdered by angry sailors in 1450. Richard, Duke of York, had a strong claim to the throne through his descent from Edward III's second and fourth sons. York believed he could rule better than Henry. In 1453, catastrophe struck. Henry suffered a complete mental breakdown. He became catatonic, unable to speak or recognise anyone. He couldn't govern at all. York was appointed protector and ruled in Henry's name, but Queen Margaret hated York and saw him as a threat to her infant son's inheritance. Henry recovered somewhat in 1455. Margaret immediately removed York from power. York refused to accept this and raised an army. The two sides met at St Albans in May 1455. This first Battle of St Albans was brief but bloody. York's forces won and captured Henry. York didn't try to take the throne yet. He just wanted to control the government. He became protector again while keeping Henry as figurehead king. But Margaret continued plotting against York. The kingdom split between Lancastrian supporters of Henry and Yorkist nobles backing Richard. Fighting erupted repeatedly over the next few years. Neither side could gain permanent advantage. England descended into civil war. The conflict became known as the Wars of the Roses. The Lancastrians used a red rose as their symbol. The Yorkists adopted a white rose. York was killed in battle in 1460 at Wakefield. Margaret's forces won decisively and displayed York's head on the walls of York City. But York's son Edward continued the fight. He was young, tall, and a brilliant military commander, everything his father wasn't. Edward won a massive victory at Towton in March 1461. The battle was the bloodiest ever fought on English soil. Perhaps 28,000 men died. Henry and Margaret fled to Scotland. Edward marched to London and was crowned King Edward IV. The House of York had taken the throne from Lancaster. Henry VI's inability to rule had destroyed his dynasty's hold on power. His madness and weakness created the conditions for civil war that would ravage England for decades. Edward IV and the Yorkist claim to power. Edward IV became king in 1461 at age 18. After defeating Henry VI's forces, he was tall, handsome and charismatic in ways Henry never was. But his position was insecure. Henry VI was alive in Scotland with Queen Margaret. Many nobles still supported the Lancastrian cause. Margaret invaded northern England repeatedly. Edward had to fight battles at Hedgeley Moor and Hexham in 1464 to defeat her forces completely. Henry VI was captured in 1465 and imprisoned in the Tower of London. Margaret fled to France with her son. The Lancastrian cause seemed finished. Edward's biggest supporter was Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, called Warwick the Kingmaker. Warwick's military power and wealth had been crucial to Edward's victory. But Edward and Warwick quarrelled over foreign policy and marriages. Warwick wanted Edward to ally with France. Edward preferred Burgundy. The final break came in 1464. Edward secretly married Elizabeth Woodville, a commoner widow. Warwick had been negotiating a French royal marriage for Edward. Edward's marriage humiliated Warwick publicly. Even worse, Edward promoted Elizabeth's relatives to important positions. The Woodville family gained power and lands. Warwick felt pushed aside after putting Edward on the throne. In 1469 he rebelled and briefly captured Edward, but he couldn't hold power and released him. Warwick fled to France in 1470. In an astonishing reversal, he allied with his old enemy Margaret of Anjou. They agreed to restore Henry VI to the throne. Warwick invaded England with French support. Edward was caught unprepared and had to flee to Burgundy. Warwick freed Henry VI from the Tower. Henry was king again after 9 years of imprisonment. But he was mentally fragile and Warwick actually controlled the government. Edward gathered an army in Burgundy and invaded England in March 1471. Support for Henry was weak. Many nobles switched back to Edward. Edward defeated Warwick at the Battle of Barnet in April. Warwick died fighting. The same day, Margaret landed in England with her son. Edward marched to intercept Margaret's forces. They met at Tewkesbury in May. Edward won decisively. Margaret's son was killed, ending the direct Lancastrian male line. Henry VI died in the Tower of London days later. The official story said he died of melancholy. Everyone assumed Edward had him murdered. Edward now ruled securely. The Lancastrian leaders were all dead or in exile. No serious rival remained to challenge him. Edward proved to be an effective king. He restored order, promoted trade, and managed finances well. He avoided expensive foreign wars. He governed increasingly without parliament, using creative methods to raise money. Royal power grew stronger under his stable rule. Edward died suddenly in April 1483 at age 40. He was only 40 years old. His death was unexpected and left his 12-year-old son as heir. Edward IV had secured the Yorkist dynasty through military victory and competent rule, but he left behind young children and feuding relatives. His brother Richard would seize the opportunity this created. Richard III's short reign ends at Bosworth Field. Edward IV died suddenly in April 1483. His 12-year-old son was supposed to become King Edward IX. But the boy's uncle Richard had other plans. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, had been loyal to Edward IV throughout his reign. He was an experienced military commander and administrator. Edward IV had named Richard as protector to govern until young Edward V came of age. Richard escorted his nephew to London for the coronation, but Richard arrested the boy's maternal relatives, the Woodvilles, along the way. He claimed they were plotting against him. The boy was placed in the Tower of London for safety. Richard then had Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville declared invalid. This made Edward V and his brother illegitimate. They couldn't inherit the throne. Parliament accepted Richard's claim that he was the rightful king. Richard was crowned in July 1483, just 3 months after his brother's death. Edward V and his younger brother disappeared inside the Tower of London. They were never seen again. Most people assumed Richard had them murdered. 2 skeletons of children were found in the tower in 1674. Many historians believe these were the princes, though proof remains debated. Richard faced immediate rebellions. Many nobles believed he had murdered innocent children to steal the throne. His support was shallow. Henry Tudor was living in exile in France. His claim to the throne was weak through his mother's Lancastrian descent, but he represented an alternative to Richard. Rebels rallied around Henry as a figurehead. Richard crushed an early rebellion in 1483, but opposition continued growing. Henry invaded England in August 1485. He landed in Wales with a small French army and gathered supporters as he marched. Richard assembled his forces and marched to intercept Henry. They met at Bosworth Field on August 22, 1485. Richard had more troops initially, but several noble commanders switched sides during the battle or refused to fight. The Stanley family's betrayal was decisive. Richard fought bravely in the final moments. He charged directly at Henry, trying to kill him personally. Richard was surrounded and killed in the fighting. Richard's crown was supposedly found in a thorn bush and placed on Henry's head on the battlefield. The Wars of the Roses were effectively over. Richard had ruled for only 2 years. His reign was dominated by suspicion over the prince's fate. Whether he was a child-murdering villain or a capable king, unfairly maligned, remains debated. Henry Tudor became King Henry VII. A new dynasty would now rule England, ending the Plantagenet line that had held the throne for over 300 years. Henry VII founds the Tudor dynasty. Henry VII became king after defeating Richard III at Bosworth Field in 1485. His claim to the throne was extremely weak by blood. His mother, Margaret Beaufort, descended from John of Gaunt through an illegitimate line. Parliament had once declared this line barred from inheriting the throne, but Henry won by conquest and Parliament accepted him. England was exhausted from decades of civil war. People wanted stability more than perfect legitimacy. Henry moved quickly to secure his position. He dated his reign from the day before Bosworth, making Richard's supporters technically traitors. He married Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV, in January 1486. This united the houses of Lancaster and York symbolically. Their marriage banner combined the red and white roses into the Tudor rose. The Wars of the Roses were officially over. But Henry faced rebellions immediately. Yorkist supporters tried to overthrow him twice using pretenders claiming to be Edward IV's sons. Lambert Simnel claimed to be Edward, Earl of Warwick, in 1487. Henry defeated the rebels at Stoke Field. He was merciful to Simnel, giving him a job in the royal kitchens. Perkin Warbeck claimed to be Richard, Duke of York, one of the princes in the Tower. This rebellion was more serious and lasted from 1491 to 1499. Warbeck gained support from foreign rulers including Scotland and Burgundy, but he never gained significant support inside England. He was eventually captured and executed. Henry ruled through careful financial management rather than military glory. He rebuilt the royal treasury that decades of war had drained. He used bonds and recognizances to control nobles. These were financial agreements that nobles forfeited if they broke the law or betrayed the king. Henry avoided expensive wars. He negotiated treaties instead of fighting. The Treaty of Medina del Campo with Spain in 1489 arranged his son Arthur's marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Henry promoted trade and supported merchants. He understood that a wealthy kingdom made a powerful king. Commerce flourished during his reign. He re-established effective royal justice. Special courts like the Star Chamber dealt with powerful people who ordinary courts couldn't touch. Henry was cautious and calculating, never taking unnecessary risks. He survived because he was careful, not charismatic. His wife Elizabeth died in 1503 after childbirth. Henry became increasingly isolated and miserly in his final years. His eldest son Arthur had died in 1502, leaving younger son Henry as heir. This was the boy who would become Henry VIII. Henry VII died in April 1509 at age 52. He left behind a stable kingdom, a full treasury, and a secure succession. He had achieved what seemed impossible in 1485, establishing a new dynasty after decades of civil war. The Tudors would rule England for over a century, shaping it into a major European power. Henry VIII breaks from Rome and marries 6 times. Henry VIII became king in 1509 at age 17. He was athletic, educated and handsome. England celebrated having a young, vigorous king after his cautious father. Henry married Catherine of Aragon, his brother Arthur's widow, shortly after becoming king. A papal dispensation allowed this marriage to his brother's wife. Henry's early reign focused on warfare and glory. He invaded France in 1513 and won the Battle of the Spurs. England defeated Scotland at Flodden the same year. But these wars were expensive and achieved little. Henry's chief minister, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, gradually steered him toward diplomacy instead. Henry's great crisis began in the 1520s. Catherine had given him only one surviving child, Mary. Henry desperately wanted a male heir. He convinced himself that marrying his brother's widow had been sinful. This explained why his sons had all died young. He needed to end the marriage. Henry asked Pope Clement VII to annul his marriage in 1527. Annulment would declare the marriage invalid from the start, making Mary illegitimate. The Pope refused. Catherine was the aunt of Emperor Charles V, the most powerful ruler in Europe. Clement couldn't antagonize Charles by granting the annulment. Henry was also infatuated with Anne Boleyn, a lady at court. She refused to become his mistress and insisted on marriage. Henry's desire for Anne intensified his need for annulment. When the Pope wouldn't cooperate, Henry took drastic action. He broke England's allegiance to Rome entirely. Parliament passed laws making Henry supreme head of the Church in England. This was revolutionary. England had been Catholic for 900 years. Now Henry controlled the English Church completely, independent of papal authority. Henry married Anne Boleyn in 1533 after declaring his marriage to Catherine Invalid. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, Henry's appointment, approved the annulment. Anne gave birth to Elizabeth in September 1533. Henry was disappointed she wasn't a boy. Anne had miscarriages afterward and failed to produce a son. Henry turned against Anne by 1536. She was arrested on false charges of adultery and treason. She was executed in May 1536. Henry married Jane Seymour 11 days after Anne's execution. Jane finally gave him a son, Edward, in 1537, but Jane died days after childbirth. Henry dissolved the monasteries between 1536 and 1540. He seized all monastic lands and wealth. This made the crown enormously rich, and created a class of nobles dependent on keeping the Reformation. Henry married 3 more times. Anne of Cleves was a political match that Henry quickly annulled. Catherine Howard was executed for adultery. Catherine Parr survived him. Henry's reign transformed England fundamentally. The break with Rome changed English religion and politics permanently. Royal power reached new heights. Henry died in January 1547 at age 55. He left behind 3 children from different marriages: Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. Each would eventually rule England, and religious conflict would dominate their reigns. Edward VI's Protestant reforms during his short life. Edward VI became king in 1547 at age 9 after his father Henry VIII died. He was England's first Protestant king, raised in the new faith from birth. Edward was too young to rule personally. A council of regents governed in his name. His uncle Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, became Lord Protector. Somerset was a committed Protestant. He pushed religious reforms much further than Henry VIII ever had. Henry had broken with Rome but kept many Catholic practices. Somerset allowed priests to marry. He ordered the removal of religious images from churches. Stained glass windows were smashed. Wall paintings were whitewashed. The Book of Common Prayer was introduced in 1549. This was the first official prayer book in English rather than Latin. Everyone could now understand church services. Many common people resented these changes. The Western Rebellion erupted in Cornwall and Devon in 1549. Rebels demanded the return of Catholic worship. Somerset crushed the rebellion violently. Thousands died. But his harsh response and other failures led to his downfall. John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, seized power in 1549. He pushed even more radical reforms. Protestant refugees from continental Europe were welcome to England. Foreign Protestant theologians influenced English church doctrine. The reforms became more Calvinist in nature. Catholic practices were systematically eliminated. A new Book of Common Prayer was issued in 1552. This version removed remaining Catholic elements. Churches were stripped of altars, replaced with simple communion tables. Edward himself was deeply committed to Protestantism. Despite his youth, he studied theology seriously. He kept a journal documenting his religious views. Edward believed Catholic worship was idolatry. He wanted to purify the English Church completely. He supported the radical reforms enthusiastically. His older half-sister Mary remained Catholic. Edward knew she would reverse everything if she became queen. This terrified Protestant reformers. Edward fell seriously ill in early 1553. He probably had tuberculosis. Doctors realised he was dying. He was only 15 years old. Northumberland panicked. If Mary became queen, he would lose power and probably his life. He convinced the dying Edward to change the succession. Edward wrote a document excluding both his half-sisters Mary and Elizabeth from the throne. They were declared illegitimate. The crown would pass to his cousin Lady Jane Grey. Jane was Protestant and married to Northumberland's son. Northumberland could control her. The plan seemed to secure Protestant rule. Edward died on July 6, 1553. He had ruled for just 6 years and never governed personally. His entire reign was controlled by regents. Jane Grey was proclaimed queen, but the plan collapsed within days. The English people supported Mary as the rightful heir. Mary raised an army and marched on London. Support for Jane evaporated. Northumberland was arrested. Jane's reign lasted only 9 days. Edward's Protestant reforms had transformed the English Church dramatically. But they happened too fast for many people. The backlash helped Mary take the throne. Edward's brief life showed how religious conviction could drive radical change. His reforms established Protestantism deeply in England, even though Mary would try to reverse them. The foundations Edward laid would ultimately prove permanent. Mary, I attempts to restore Catholicism. Mary became Queen in July 1553 after defeating Jane Grey's supporters. She was 37 years old and had waited decades for this moment. Mary was Henry VIII's daughter by Catherine of Aragon. She had been declared illegitimate when Henry annulled her parents' marriage. She never forgave her father or accepted Protestantism. Mary had remained Catholic throughout Edward's reign despite pressure to convert. Her faith was the core of her identity. Restoring Catholicism became her mission. England celebrated Mary's accession initially. People supported her legitimate claim regardless of religion. But her religious policies quickly created opposition. Mary released Catholic bishops imprisoned under Edward. She appointed them to important positions. Protestant leaders were removed from power. Parliament repealed Edward's religious laws. The Book of Common Prayer was abolished. Latin Mass returned. Married priests had to abandon their wives or lose their positions. Mary wanted to reunite England with Rome completely. But she moved cautiously at first. Many nobles who supported her politically weren't eager to restore papal authority. Mary announced her intention to marry Philip of Spain in 1553. This was deeply unpopular. The English feared Spanish influence and losing independence. Wyatt's rebellion erupted in 1554. Thomas Wyatt led thousands of men toward London, protesting the Spanish marriage. The rebellion came close to success. Mary's forces barely defeated the rebels. Wyatt was executed along with other leaders. Lady Jane Grey was executed too, though she'd played no part in this rebellion. Mary married Philip in July 1554. He was 11 years younger and showed little interest in her personally. The marriage was political for Spain. Philip encouraged Mary to reconcile with Rome. Cardinal Pole arrived as papal legate in November 1554. Parliament formally accepted papal authority again. England was officially Catholic once more. But many people had converted to Protestantism sincerely. They wouldn't abandon their faith easily. Mary began burning Protestant heretics in 1555. She believed saving souls justified execution. Those who refused to recant their Protestant beliefs were burned at stake. Nearly 300 people were executed over 3 years. These included Thomas Cranmer, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, who had annulled Mary's parents' marriage. The burnings made Mary deeply unpopular. People called her Bloody Mary. The Protestant martyrs became heroes. Their deaths strengthened Protestantism rather than destroying it. Mary believed she was doing holy work. She couldn't understand why people rejected the true faith. She became increasingly isolated and bitter. Mary desperately wanted children to secure Catholic succession. She announced pregnancies twice. Both were false pregnancies, probably caused by psychological stress and illness. Her failure to produce an heir meant her half-sister Elizabeth would inherit. Elizabeth was Protestant. Everything Mary achieved would be undone. Philip spent little time in England. He involved England in Spain's war with France. England lost Calais in 1558, its last continental possession. Losing Calais was humiliating. England had held the port for over 200 years. Mary said Calais would be found written on her heart when she died. Mary fell seriously ill in 1558. She was only 42 but worn down by stress and illness. She finally accepted Elizabeth as her heir. Mary died on November 17th, 1558. She had ruled for 5 years. Her attempt to restore Catholicism had failed completely. The burnings ensured Protestantism became associated with English national identity. Catholics were now viewed with suspicion. Mary's reign strengthened what she tried to destroy. Her tragic rule demonstrated that religious change couldn't be reversed by force alone. Elizabeth's Golden Age and the Spanish Armada. Elizabeth became queen in November 1558 at age 25. She inherited a kingdom divided by religion and weakened by war. Elizabeth had survived dangerous years under Mary's reign. She had been imprisoned in the Tower, suspected of plotting. She learned caution and political skill. Elizabeth's religious settlement aimed at compromise. She restored Protestantism but kept some traditional ceremonies. She wanted a church most people could accept. The Act of Supremacy made Elizabeth supreme governor of the church. The title was less aggressive than her father's supreme head. The Book of Common Prayer returned. But Elizabeth didn't persecute Catholics who attended church quietly. She famously said she had no desire to make windows into men's souls. This moderate approach worked initially. England had religious peace compared to the wars tearing France apart, but tensions grew over time. Mary, Queen of Scots, fled to England in 1568 after losing her throne. She was Elizabeth's Catholic cousin, with a claim to the English crown. Mary became the focus of Catholic plots against Elizabeth. Rebellions erupted in the north in 1569. Elizabeth crushed them but kept Mary imprisoned. Pope Pius V excommunicated Elizabeth in 1570. He declared her a heretic and released Catholics from obedience. This made English Catholics potential traitors. Elizabeth's government grew more suspicious. Catholic priests were hunted. Those caught faced execution for treason, not heresy. Over 100 were executed during her reign. Elizabeth refused to marry despite constant pressure. Parliament begged her to produce an heir. She kept potential suitors interested but committed to no one. She probably decided early never to marry. A husband would dominate her. Marriage meant losing power. She chose to rule alone. Elizabeth used the possibility of marriage as diplomatic tool for decades. She negotiated with French and Spanish princes, keeping foreign powers hopeful. Her government was led by capable ministers, especially William Cecil, and later his son Robert. They provided stability and competent administration. England's economy grew during Elizabeth's reign. Trade expanded. Privateers like Francis Drake raided Spanish treasure ships and circumnavigated the globe. Relations with Spain deteriorated steadily. Philip II, who had been married to Mary, saw Elizabeth as a heretic usurper. English support for Dutch Protestant rebels fighting Spain increased tensions. Elizabeth finally executed Mary, Queen of Scots in 1587 after another plot was discovered. Philip decided this was the final provocation. Philip assembled an enormous fleet called the Spanish Armada. 130 ships carrying 30,000 men would invade England and restore Catholicism. The Armada sailed in July 1588. English ships harassed it up the English Channel. The Spanish anchored off Calais, waiting to collect troops from the Netherlands. English commanders sent fireships into the anchored fleet. The Spanish scattered in panic. The English attacked at the Battle of Gravelines. English guns damaged many Spanish ships. More importantly, the battle prevented the Armada from collecting invasion troops. The Spanish had to sail home. Terrible storms struck as the Armada sailed around Scotland and Ireland. Ships were wrecked on rocky coasts. Less than half the fleet returned to Spain. The Armada's defeat was celebrated as divine intervention protecting Protestant England. Elizabeth's popularity soared. England had survived its greatest threat. Elizabeth's later years were less glorious. War with Spain dragged on expensively. Rebellions in Ireland consumed resources. Economic problems mounted. But Elizabeth maintained stability until her death in March 1603. She was 69 and had ruled for 44 years. Elizabeth never named an heir officially. But she indicated James VI of Scotland, Mary Queen of Scots' son, should succeed. The Tudor dynasty ended, but England transitioned peacefully to the Stuarts. Elizabeth's reign became remembered as a golden age of stability, culture, and national pride.